So at the rate we're going, the pay gap could take decades, even longer, to close. Joining me to discuss, author and pay equity expert C. Nicole Mason. Nicole, I think sometimes people hear us talk about equal pay day, and it sounds like it is purely about fairness, but it has real world impacts that go beyond basic fairness. Why does this matter?
So this matters, the closing the pay gap matters for women because it delays major milestones. Women can lose up to $1 million over their careers to the pay gap. And for women of color, it can be more. But it impacts our everyday lives, especially like when we think about what happened in the pandemic. Women didn't have a lot of savings to pull on, and they were the first to leave the workforce. So the pay gap really makes a difference in women's everyday lives. And impacts their ability to take care of their families.
Well, to that point, I got to tell you, I just watched the women in here. Everybody perked up when you said $1 million, because it's the thing. You can look at it as the difference it is per dollar. When you add that up over a lifetime, that is a seismic shift in who has wealth in this country and who is then in a position to make decisions in this country. It also strikes me, we're talking yesterday with Reverend Barber. We're talking with Congressman Bowman about the affordability crisis that we're seeing in this country, right? The number of people who are unhoused or getting pushed out of the housing market, the number of people who feel that the cost of groceries is too high, the number of people who cannot afford quality child care in this country. Talk to me about how all of those issues and talking about affordability generally is affected by the pay gap.
So women were the first to feel the impacts of inflation because they go to the grocery stores to buy groceries. You talked about housing. After the pandemic, there were less available childcare slots, so childcare became much more expensive for families, and especially for women who are the primary breadwinners in their families. They felt it, in their bottom line. So when we talk about affordability and what the pay gap means, it hits women directly in their pockets, and they feel it every day as they go about trying to provide for their families, buy groceries, buy a home. The pay gap delays major milestones like home ownership. Women retire with less. So, along the way, at every, phase of life for women, the pay gap impacts them. Student loans, women are more likely to have more student loans than men. With less money to pay down that debt, they're more likely to be paying longer. It really matters for women.
All of those issues compound, and it strikes me that we're following what is happening in Texas with Judge Kaczmarek and this ruling that is going to come down any day now about abortion pills. We've talked a lot about living in a post-Roe America and how very often when we talk about choice, it is framed as a social issue. You can argue it's a social issue. It's also an economic issue. And as we sit here and we talk about the wage gap in America, that reality, choices you make, when to build a family, how to build a family, these are not separate issues. They're deeply connected.
Absolutely. So women and states lose up to $105 billion annually to abortion restrictions and the lack of reproductive health care access. Again, women's ability to decide when they're going to become a mother or start a family directly impacts their long-term economic security and well-being. And as we know, because of the childcare crisis and when women off-ramp to take care of their children, there's a penalty there. Okay. So, across the board, there's a really strong connection between women's reproductive health and autonomy and their economic security and well-being.
It also strikes me, it's year 3 of the pandemic. At the start, we talked a lot about the She Session to describe the job loss, the economic hardship that women specifically were going through. Your sense of where we are now, what has to be done, what has been done to make up specifically for those losses?
So women were the first to leave the workforce during the pandemic. Women lost 4 times as many jobs as men during the pandemic. And while unemployment numbers are lower at the start of the pandemic, there were 16 and 70% for women. They're hovering around 3 or 4% right now, but we're still not fully recovered. And women are still struggling with issues such as childcare, finding a job that allows them flexibility. These are still really big issues for women, even even as the pandemic subsides. And I thought that after the pandemic, we would definitely get childcare, we would definitely get paid sick and family leave, but that's just not been the case. And so we still have a lot more work to make sure that women can not only reenter the workforce, but are able to stay there, as well.